Hello and welcome to another instalment of Inside Real Estate. Today we're here with Craig Parker from Shire Build. We're going to try and sort of hack into what some of the common myths, maybe some of the mistakes that are out there, and just really have that great chat, find out a little bit more about what's involved in building and renovating your home. So Craig, firstly, welcome to the show.
Thanks for being here.
And Craig, tell me, Shire Build, where did the name come from?
I've basically lived in the Shire for my whole life. So started out in carpentry and worked my way up to being a supervisor, and then eventually I was being asked by friends and family to see if I could help them out at the house doing a deck or a pergola or moving some walls, so started doing that on the side. Eventually started getting larger jobs and then just moved into starting my whole business and going out full time, and thought I love the Shire, I'd like to work in the Shire and keep it local.
So 15 years you've been doing this. You started from, I guess, that really grassroots, and you've really, cut your teeth on bigger and bigger projects. And what would you say your most common project is today?
Most common projects are major extensions, either a first floor addition out the back or a combination of the two. That's our sort of core works. And then we go down to do decks and pergolas and bathrooms, laundry renovations, kitchens, and then we'll also do new homes. And we'll do a bit of everything. We don't want to just say we just do one thing and we don't do the other. We try and get all the different subcontractors in so that we can offer a full service package.
One of the questions I'd love to ask is, what would you say the most common mistake your average consumer, when they say, let's say doing a renovation, they're thinking about changing a home significantly, say like in our industry, they've purchased a home and they want to change it, and they're thinking about adding that to it. What would be your most common mistake that people make?
Most common mistake is that people have gone and done all the plans and got everything through council and come out the other side, then they've asked me to come and do a quote. And at that point, their budget may not reflect what it actually is to build. And then I will quote and other builders will quote, and we're way over their budget, and they've already spent money on engineers, architectural fees, a whole bunch of pain and stress in going through council that didn't really touch point on what the costs are going to be. And they use the architect to use as a sounding board for price, which I believe is not a great move. Okay. They can put you in a ballpark, but I think they need to speak to a builder first.
So straight out of the block, someone's bought that house, you would suggest step one, maybe, what are the top few steps you would say to summarise on what we just talked about then?
Yeah, first step is to understand their house, know what it is in the different climates, the different seasons, and understand if they're going to put a back pergola on, how big does it need to be? Where does the sun come in? Where are they going to get hammered with the westerly sun? What's the best solution for that? To understand what it is that they need in their own house. They like the flow. Could they have a hallway in a different location that might free up the whole house? Do they want to have living quarters of bedrooms at one end, and then the other end is the entertaining and the kitchens, dinings, lounge room? Everybody wants the big open back extension with the kitchen and the dining. That seems to be what everybody wants.
It's a very trending floor plan, really, isn't it?
And it just works. You can't go wrong with it. So I typically push a bit of the outdoor as well. I'll say moving through from your kitchen, your dining out to the barbecue and the kitchen area, and like an outdoor kitchen, and what's your flow. And I try and work with people on that. Just give them some ideas. So if they think about that before they come to me and have some idea of what it is, what type of kitchens they want, and the looks, and have some sort of knowledge, not just call me up and say, I'd like to do a renovation, can you come and quote? It just, I need more info to start with.
So
I need a
maybe
price point.
A bit of a mud map and a bit of a sketch, bit of an idea list of sort of the flow or where they think they want things.
Photos,
as a rough drawing.
Instagram photos of different things. Don't necessarily go to the block and pick all of the higher end stuff. That you've got really high end stuff, but just nice, easy kitchens, bathrooms, floor plans, photos, just a bit of collage, and a price. You need to know roughly what you're prepared to spend, and I can work with them on that.
Okay, so someone's got together, they've drawn some things up, they've got a bit of an idea what they think they want, they've got a bit of an idea on price that they're hoping to spend. Is that about when they should engage a builder to come out and have a chat about that then? That's the next thing?
Yeah, the next thing is what we call a feasibility estimate. So the feasibility estimate is me as a building consultant would come to their house, spend an hour with them, hour and a half, go through the house, go through their designs, what it is that they'd like. I throw some ideas out, see if I think there could be a better way of doing it, and then point them in the direction of an architect. And I don't bother going down the engineer's path. I go to an architect first and try and get that ball rolling of design. But I will, in the initial stages, I'll do that meeting, and then I'll do a feasibility estimate on a spreadsheet, and I just put it down into a point form of what it is that they're requesting: bedroom, bathroom, kitchen, back deck, And if there's an extension out the back, it'll be a square meters of X amount of space. I'll look at the house, what type of house, brick veneer, timber clad, something different, and then I'll put a rough square metre rate to it and give them something in the ballpark of where they're heading.
Yep.
And then they can make an informed choice of whether or not to add on the rumpus room and the garage and the other works, or peel it back just to a simplified version.
Yep.
And then they know that they can do those other things down the track.
So by doing that as well, I guess if they've got that, there's always that ability to go a little bit further, like you said, or maybe even do it in stages if they realise budget's starting to get out of control at that point even.
Stages is probably the key thing that I would recommend to clients if they don't have the budget now, then to find what it is that they can afford and what's most important, and what do I believe. I'll give them advice on what I think is easier to stage and add on later. Sometimes I think when it comes to structural builds, it's better to get the structure done first and leave the linen press and the wardrobe. You can fit that out later. Leave the back deck for the moment, just do the pergola structure over the top, and you can always do a concrete slab or something down the track. So I try and find ways to work with their budget to get their best bang for their buck when they're using me for structural stuff. And then they can always get their own. They might have a cousin or an uncle or somebody who does decks. Great, they can go to do that. It's not going to be a big council requirement. The structural stuff is where they need my expertise, and I'm happy to pass off stuff that's not, carpets and blinds and things like that. They don't need me to put those in, so they can get those things done on themselves.
And long term, as you said, I guess if someone's worked out that stage process, then how you do stage one might have a slight reflect on the build, so that stage two's an easier add-on rather than going 3 steps forwards, 2 steps backwards to then go forwards again. So just having that plan in place is what you're recommending.
The plan's really key for when it goes to council. You don't want to be doing one council plan for stage one and then council plan for stage two. Right. You want to get a master plan done and get it all approved in one hit. You've only got one set of fees, architecturals, engineers. You can then stage your construction for as long as you want. So
and
once
is it true once DA's been approved, then there's, as long as you start construction, is that right? Then you've got no time limit on when you finish.
No time limit to finish.
But you do need to start.
And it is better if you can to go for a master plan. If you think over 10 years I want to have this type of house. Stage one is this, stage two is that, three is that. You've got it all approved in one set of plans, and you don't have to worry about having to go back to council. You can get little minor modifications done. It's called a Section 96, and it's a modification to an approved set of plans. So if you decide to put a window in a kitchen splashback and you go, I want to put a kitchen window there because I don't want to see a wall anymore, you can add little things in. But if you want to make major changes, you may have to go back to council.
You'd say the next step is after they've engaged you, you've gone through those ideas, and the difference between, say, an architect and a draftsman, is there?
Good question. So most people call it architect, but generally most guys are draftsmen. Architects more into the commercial space, high-end new homes. They've gone and done a uni degree, and they generally charge a lot more. They might have programs and extra overheads that you don't necessarily need. Draftsmen are generally fine. There might be a 1 or 2 sort of man team or a person team, and they do sufficient job for your standard residential new homes and renovations. So architect is the word you'd use, but draftsman they're equally qualified for doing residential work.
I guess like we have in real estate with solicitors and conveyancers.
Yep.
So ultimately, on top of that, I think using a local draftsman or architect to have some advantage, because we all know councils all vary from council to council. They have different rules.
Yep.
So dealing with each council, knowing what its rules are, is obviously probably a pretty important thing to understand.
I definitely agree with that. I think there's no point going and get a North Shore architect or a draftsman to come and do the Shire. The rules are different. The taste in the build and the structure is different. So you've got to find the area and the type of build that you like. Obviously, you go and look at some places that you've liked the look of, and then you take that to the architect as well. The same sort of portfolio of photos and Instagram shots you've got that you would come to me with, you take the same photos to the draftsman, and then he can start to get a feel for what taste it is, what sort of look you're going for, and design the house to suit hopefully that budget. And I would think somebody of the local council area is going to have a quicker process to get it through council or a complying development. So we've got the initial contact, and we touch on and we do a feasibility estimate. They then go away and get some plans done. They speak to the architect, knowing that their budget, it's going to suit their budget, and they've got their wish list, and they've got a bit of a feel for what it's going to cost with me. Then they go away and they get their plans done. Before they need to then engage me to do a full quote. So once I've got the plans back, the plans will stipulate potential change. You might need to do some privacy screens. You might need to lower the height of a wall or change things. So I actually do a full quote off some stamped plans. I don't quote on pre-stamped plans because there's going to be changes.
Yep.
I do an estimate just to help them guide them into a rough area. Once they've gone and got their plans done based on accepting those rough
like
ballparks.
you said, there could be a retaining wall that needed to be added or something like that.
Yeah,
so
there's always things that sometimes come up.
Yep.
There's also another thing which is basics, which you might want to touch on as well, but there's basics requirements, there's bushfire requirements, and I can't really quote the job properly until all of those have come together, and they can only come together once it's gone through the council or the CDC process.
So explain basics for us.
So basics is a thermal and energy and water efficiency. It basically it's a checklist that all clients, all houses, all building structures comply with what we call low E glass, which means that the glass reflects the heat or reduces how much heat gain is into a house. So the house doesn't heat up and everybody turns their air cons on. They're trying to reduce the power pull out from power energy systems by having a more environmentally friendly house, that it's thermal, acoustic, and water smart.
Yeah, for example, like houses now have tanks on the side of the houses, and they obviously use some of that water to flush toilets and things like that. You've got your LED lighting now. So what you're saying is there's a bunch of laws around making homes more efficient, and any application needs to adhere to those minimum standards.
There's a minimum standard that the architect or the draftsman, when they do their drawings, they have to also do a checklist box based on that specific house. There's a checklist, and it actually requires them to get to a minimum level, which provides, it's either across, if they just can't get to it, they have to keep modifying the plans, insulation, windows, aircon, solar, water, whatever it is, they've got to keep going at it until they get a tick. Once you've done the ticks, I then have to build to that list.
Right.
And I've got to add those things into my quote, which may or may not have come up during the initial feasibility report or the estimate. But at least I've got it there and I can actually quote it. Fantastic. So they've gone and got all that done.
So now we're through council, we've got all our stamped plans, you've done a proper quote. Next step?
So proper quote. So the quote, I do have to come back out and do another site visit. I now have a set of plans that's got a stamp on it, and I can actually measure things as a ruler. I can run a ruler over everything and actually see what it is that they're building. Did they actually increase the size of the house while they were with the architect? While we're here, actually let's just add on that extra. So my price may be different, my feasibility to the actual quote, because they've changed things during the design phase.
And everyone's thinking it's going up, but it could actually go.
It could go down if they cut stuff off. Great.
Yeah.
If they simplify it, great. If they go from a brick veneer structure to a timber cladded house, no problems. I'm happy to lower it. It's not. I just price what it is in front of me. So I can only estimate on what information I've got as a ballpark. When it actually comes through with a full design drawing, that's when I can get specific with my quoting, right down to every last nail and screw and everything. It just gets properly
really
quoted
wants,
up.
don't they?
So then we do a detailed quote, and we send it back and submit it. Normally takes 3 to 4 weeks to get a detailed quote back.
So at which point there is the consumer running around looking at flooring and bench tops and fittings and PC items? When is that occurring? At that point now, or maybe just before?
Before it, they can start to get a feel of what it is that their tastes are. Do they want a $1,000 tap, a $500, a $200 tap? If they do, while they're waiting for the quote, if they're waiting on a builder or an architect or an engineer to do stuff, or council, use the downtime to go and research your products. What do you like in your tiles? Do you want different prices? Start to get a look and feel of the taste that you've got, the costs of those items. They're called PC items, so anything that's bought from a store with a barcode on it and in a box and you put it in your car and take it home, that's a PC item, prime cost. And they can work on fridges, appliances, all of the tiles, all the pretty things, and they have ultimate control of the cost of those items and the bottom line of their job. I can build the structure and they don't have much choice in the structure, but the finishing is probably a third of the cost of the job, the finishing side of it, and they have a choice on low, medium or high range products, and that can blow their budget. Or if they've got the budget, great, that's up to them.
Oven would add to that budget.
Use the time to go and research it.
So at that point, you can advise them on some suppliers you deal with that you're very happy with and had good rapport with, and/or they can go and buy their own either or.
That's right. So they can shop all over Sydney and do their own deals and buy it. Some clients ask me within the quote to allow for a PC pack. So I allow for all of their appliances. They just have absolutely no idea what they're up for, and they want it all included in my quote because they need it to go for the bank approval. So they need to go and get $500,000 for a large reno, and the bank needs a total cost. They don't know what it's going to cost for carpet, curtains, stairs, all the other things. So they need a bulk package. I don't want clients going and buying everything before the job's even started. I'm quoting. If they want if they had a sale, go buy it. But you want to be careful what it is you bought. Is it fit for purpose? Sometimes there's better ways you can get in-wall systems for a toilet rather than one that stands on the floor. There's different types of vanities. So I prefer to guide clients through the different choices that are out there and what to buy and install. Some things are very expensive to install. So they might have found something that's great, but it's actually really difficult to install. So I like to tell people, get an idea, get some rough prices on what you want, make that sort of list of everything you wish list, but don't buy anything until we've started construction.
I know with, say, knockdown rebuilds, obviously there's a couple of things that go on a little bit differently to a renovation. For example, if you're doing a knockdown rebuild and it's in the Sutherland Shire Council, there is a council contribution that you pay, which is 1% of your build cost.
Yep.
And there's also a bond that you pay, which you get back at the end of the construction.
Yep.
Now, when someone's doing a renovation, like you said, a significant renovation, is that part of that process as well?
There's no they may have changed the rules on contributions. That might be inbuilt within the fees, but it's a low cost. It's more for new builds. But there is a bond still for renovations, and it's generally covering the curb and gutters and the streets, the infrastructure out on the street side from damage of trucks and vehicles during the project.
Yeah, and that's on the client to pay that directly to the
They pay that direct as part of all their fees, but they get it back if there's no damage. And if there is damage, the cost of the damage is taken out.
Yeah, and what's important if someone's doing a knockdown rebuild is ultimately there's a DA for an application on the knockdown, and there's also a DA on the application of the new rebuild. There are two separate ones.
There's two separate ones.
Yeah, and a private certifier is involved on either side, so you may use the same certifier or two different certifiers, but you've got a couple of steps there that
there are some
you
steps.
Need to know
that's just the
front,
nature.
So
you can't just press a button and have everything just magically appear. You've definitely got to jump through hoops. It's a stressful part of for people. What we try and do is reduce the stress. There's a lot of financial impact on people. There's the logistics of moving out and renting or living through, if they are living in the house and there's a renovation, there's the dust and the noise. I try and advise clients to move out where possible because there's all of that impact.
Yeah.
If they've got little kids and they've got limited access. So I'll guide clients on whether or not they can stay in the house or not. I try and help them if they just can't afford to move out. They've just got to put up with the pain and suffering of noise if they're getting a first floor addition done above them, all that noise coming through the house. But there's the red tape suffering of going through councils, all the drafting. It takes time, engineers. But we can advise the client if they start with the right process, we can link them from the next person to the next person, just guide them the whole way along. I may not even get the job, but in that initial stage, I'm happy to throw out some numbers, give them some advice. If we get the job, great. If we don't, I've helped them along the way. But it's more that they've got through, they haven't gone 2 steps forward and have to come. It's better to go through that process.
I think that's where a lot of stress is created, is that people get so far down the track and then realise there's something they didn't even know. Whereas I think if people knew there was a list of 15 things they need to do up front, I think that would be very helpful because they know, okay, these are the steps and the orders I need to do things. One of the successes we've had with you of late too is that we've had consumers that are looking to buy a house that they do want to remodel it and update it, but it's very easy to say, oh yeah, just do a renovation. But as we know, there's contingencies and a whole bunch of things, and we get asked questions all the time at open houses. Is that's structural, you couldn't change it. But so what's your take on when a buyer looks at a floor plan and they want to change it, but they're worried about whether it's structural or not?
It's a good question. Generally, then it's not hundreds of thousands of dollars to move walls. It's normally around, it could be 10 or 20,000 to move a wall. It could be just, $1,000. It depends on the style of wall it is, what's holding it up. So they can engage myself or another builder or an engineer to pop out. Ultimately, an engineer makes the call on larger structural walls where there's steel beams and posts involved. If it's just some timber framing up in the roof, quite easy to install. Once it's up in the roof, we can pull the wall out, modify the electrics, patch the gyprock, patch the floor, and they've got an open space. So we do it all the time. It's not something, but a lot of people are afraid of structural walls.
Yes.
It's just another thing to do. So I wouldn't buy or not buy a house just because a wall has to be removed. I'd say get an engineer in or a builder just to provide a quote, and then they get the right information before they buy a house.
So for buyers out there and they've seen a property and it's midway through its campaign and they're still thinking about whether they should buy it and how much money they might need to spend on changing it, and that's part of the reason they want to buy it, contacting someone like yourself to do a bit of a feasibility study on some of those ideas they may have is something that you offer.
We offer that. I don't know how many builders do. Most builders just say, no, we don't do it. I don't actually know of any who do at this stage, but I don't really get invested in what other builders are doing. I just know what I do. We just do a feasibility estimate, same deal as if we're doing it for people who are getting ready for construction. I do the same feasibility for people who are looking at buying. Doesn't really matter. They're paying for my time to come out and do the site visit, look at the structural integrity of the building. I'm not an engineer. I'm not going to sign off and I'm just going to say, yes, you can move that wall I believe. You'd still have to get an engineer to sign off on it should you go ahead. But I believe it's doable. It's not going to cost the earth to do it. And we might give them some ideas on how to open up the space and create what it is that they want. So happy to provide a service for that. And then we do a costing for it. And then they say, well, while you're here, can you look at we need the bathroom needs an upgrade, the deck's falling apart. And so I put on different costs, and they can just kind of get an overall, okay, we're up for $50,000 roughly of modifications over that, but they've got time to do. They don't have to do it straight away. They can move in, and then they've got 6 months and have a hit list of what they want to do, and know that they've got their entire budget. They've bought a house, they're financed for X amount, so they've got a bit of extra room, and we know, do we get him in? Do we get Craig or another builder in for right away, or do we wait 6 months and then get him in to do the work?
Well, I think it's a fantastic idea. I think a lot of people who are thinking of changing a house, we've worked with 2 clients of late, and both times not only do those clients take on that service that you offer, but they end up buying the house, probably because they were better educated about the house, which is really important. But like what you touched on right at the start of this interview was that, they don't have to do any of those things. They can do them when they want. And advice we both agree on is that, living in a home for maybe a few seasons and getting a feel for, where the breeze comes from, what it's like in different times of the year, that'll give you an idea on where light's coming from, and you just get a better handle on the home, and that's going to have a big influence on, even maybe something that you quoted on as a possibility of moving a wall. 6 months later, they realise actually that wall's quite valuable where it is, so they might have a new idea. But just having that, idea to start with gives them the security that what they are hoping to do is there. But then once they've lived in the home a little bit, possibly changing that a little along the way is important before they maybe go to the next step, like we talked about with the full engagement of doing a reno. I agree with everything there. I think living in the house, understanding the house is key. If you want to just add a back deck on, great, you kind of know what you're going to expect. But I think living in the house and getting a better feel for it, you start to get ideas, and then it's. I think that's a good way of doing it. Fantastic. So, Craig, I guess as a bit of a summary of today, and is there probably like a couple of key points out of this that you'd say, look, first and foremost, if people take that away with them, they're probably in front. Have you got any key points that you could?
Key points. I think contact a builder to begin with for a rough estimate. Just a rough estimate, on some sort of a concept drawing, a rough sketch, something that they would like to have, and just get a rough feel what it is they're up for before they go through plans, councils, engineers, and realise it's going to be above their budget. That's one of the big ones that people are afraid of. The second one that I would say is when you have to allow for time to go through all of the red tape, being DA or CDC for your plans and approvals, engineers costs, time for builders to quote. It can be a year. A year can go from the time you've had an idea to the time you start construction can be a year and more.
And so that's why quoting after the plans have been submitted is more accurate, because obviously there could be price rises and...
There's price, until I got the stamp plans, it's hard to quote. So once I've got that, and then it takes time for me to quote it and get actual realistic today prices for that particular item. Don't call me 2 years ago if I've got a quote from 2 years ago and then they call me up and say, I actually want to go ahead. I can't.
Well, that's a good point. Before we go today, there's also that lead time. A lot of builders are booked out quite well in advance because each project does take many months to complete. So there's only so many you can do at once, I would imagine. So
yeah, I'm not going to build my team to 100 employees just so I can service everybody. I don't want to be a big company. I'm just comfortable with the size team I've got. We provide a quality job for the clients, and I want to manage that and not be too big. So as long as you've got a decent quote to start with, you can use my quote as a reference point for costings and details. So if I'm busy and I just can't fit you in this calendar year and it has to be next and you can't wait, then at least you can use mine as a sounding board for somebody else's. That's fine. I don't mind, as long as they get what they need and what they want for their budget. If I lose a job, I lose a job. I'm not going to try and squeeze them in and affect everybody. So they have to allow time for builders to be available, and especially don't call before Christmas asking for a deck and pergola.
And I guess just maybe to sum this up, how does one in the end choose a builder? I mean, most people get a couple of quotes, that kind of thing, but if you're sitting there, how do you know which builder to choose? Is it just the cheapest price, the highest price? I mean, well, what would your read on helping people make that decision?
Price is a factor. Obviously, everybody always comes down to numbers, but I think if there's a couple of prices within a ballpark of one another, I think it needs to come down to the personal relationship between the builder and the client. If you don't get on, if you don't feel like you've got the room to be able to ask questions, the trust that the builder's going to give you what you need, and try and look out for your costs. I think that. So I try and look at it from their point of view. How much is it going to cost them? That's a big ticket item. If I can find a saving for them, I'll try and advise different ways of making a saving so that they're not blowing all their money on a particular thing. So I try and be cost prohibitive. I try to, have their trust from the start. And I think that's one of the major factors, other than the cost of the build. And then thirdly, so there's three main things: the cost, trust, and detail in the quote. The quote should be detailed. And if you're going to compare different builders, you need to see how they're written, what's involved, what's included, excluded. Everybody's going to have slightly different write-ups of how they do it, but they can always, if they've got another quote and they're not sure what to do, obviously they can ask a friend, a lawyer, or somebody they can ask, or they can ask me and I can say, well, I've included this, they've excluded that, I've excluded this, they've included that. But at the end of the day, it comes down to their final judgment. But hopefully my quotes, and most builders out there, hopefully they're doing detailed quotes so that it's not so much sort of unknown. You can see what's there and then you can make your call.
Yeah. So one of the things that we hadn't spoken about till now is that when people build, there's obviously different zoning within, say, a shire or the council or something like that.
Yep.
And each block will fit into that. Now, one of them can have an effect on what they build, but as a topic, one specific thing could be a bushfire zone, as an example. How does and a bushfire zone has a bower rating,
Yep.
and that rating has different numbers.
Yep.
How does that affect a renovation?
So the renovation gets affected by the materials used around the external parts of the house to protect it from a bushfire event. So the bower rating is for bushfire attack level, and there's a couple of different levels. There's 12.5, 19, 29, 40, and then flame zone, or FZ.
So the higher the number, the more serious it is, obviously,
Yes.
and they're able to find that out with a contractor sale as to where that property fits into, I guess, when they do their own due diligence on the home. But
Yep.
once they've bought that home, they're doing that renovation, you'll know that zone that it's in, or the bower rating that it has.
The zone gets affected by, it eventually gets determined by a bushfire consultant. So if anybody goes to do a renovation, they have to go through a bushfire consultant, RFS. So the plans get diverted off to the RFS, they assess it, and they may send it to a bushfire consultant. But generally the architect or the draftsman at the time will be able to do some figures and work out roughly where this property sits in relation to a bushfire sort of source point, and then they can do the numbers and work out if it's a 29 or a 40. They might try and go for the 29 just because it's a lower cost point and submit it, but if the council goes through to the RFS, if they determine that it needs to be reviewed, they might ask you to get a bushfire consultant in to determine if it's a 40, and that then makes an impact on the materials that are used.
So by the time they're engaging a builder, obviously you'll know what zone it's in, and you'll know what materials you can and can't use. And
Yep.
as an example, if it was in a zone of certain bower ratings, maybe like a pine deck that would
Yep.
be easily flammable,
Yep.
might not be allowed to use, and they might have to use a different material.
Correct, yeah. So
Okay.
it changes the materials. So, different ratings. You can still use timber decks in the lower ratings, but you may just have to put some gutter guard in to stop the gutters building up with leaves, which could start a fire. If you're a couple of streets back and there's an ember attack from a fire, and it could start, your house is well away from the fire front itself, but the embers start a fire in the gutters, so you've got gutter guard that can protect you. You've got sliding doors and windows that have aluminium mesh rather than fiberglass mesh, and they're non-combustible. So that's the lower end, and you don't have to worry too much. As you start getting towards the 29 and 40s, you are going to have to start removing the amount of timber that you've got on your construction, whatever's been approved. And sometimes it goes from being a timber deck to a hardwood species. There are timber species that can comply. They can withstand a higher grade of heat before they ignite. So there is an approved list of hardwood timber. But once you get to about 40, pretty much all bets off for anything timber related outside the house.
There's more steels and concretes. And
more steel, more concrete,
the
more
right type of
composite
glass.
products.
And
There's a lot of
internally though,
companies.
no real restrictions
No
there?
changes inside. Everything's they just care about how's the fire going to get into the premises and kick it off.
Oh, yeah.
So a bower flame zone is the worst. That's where your cost point goes up exponentially. So anywhere from 12.5 to 40 is generally, it could be a 5 or 10% jump in price, but when you get to flame zone, you're adding about 25% onto the construction, because you've got a lot more restrictions, because you're basically right next to the bushfire source, and we're currently doing a flame zone property down in Janelli, and there is quite a bit on it. So you have to be prepared for the additional costs that are going to be incurred.
So one of the other things we talk about a lot in real estate is when people are looking at buying a home, clearly they're going to change that home. Now there's obviously money they want to spend on changing it, doing the reno, and that's when that renovation comes into play. Yeah. Where would you see the maximum, return on investment really creeps into people changing a house?
I think the biggest thing that they need to look at would be the kitchen, dining, rumpus and sort of TV area, the open plan living, and the flow through to the deck and the outside. That connection in Australia, we love being outdoors, whether it be the backyard, the pool, the kids. It needs to be a really good flow through, and having the parents be able to be in the kitchen area and be able to see what's going on and have that connection to the outdoors, I think is the biggest factor. And big sliding doors, bifold doors, open space, lots of light, skylights, highlight windows, and just an open feel. I think that gives the most wow factor when you come home and you have people over. It just gives you that sort of sense. You don't get that out of bedrooms. Nobody goes into bedrooms other than the people who live in the house. It's not a focal point. When people come over and you've just got that entertaining space, that's where it's all at. So I think that's the best money for value when you're doing a larger renovation. So. And
we see that with real estate. I mean, clearly floor plans do sell houses. People can swap kitchens in and out, but when you've got to amend the floor plan, this cost can go up, and consequently it can have an effect. But I think if people are putting money into a home and engaging services like yourself, one of the things I say to people all the time is that if you can take a product that's at a certain level, just updating what's in it will increase the value, but it was at an expense. So you're probably really only neutral if you're lucky. Yep. But if you can amend the floor plan to make it more modern, so it does have that flow that you talked about, well, then you've really taken it from maybe a weaker category that the home was in and into a stronger category with, slightly more expense, but the return on investment's much stronger. Yep. And the Australian lifestyle is that very much. People do want that flow, and the kitchen, for example, is the heart of every home, but at the same time, it doesn't mean it's in the middle of the house, because ultimately flowing out in the outdoor entertaining, we do a lot of indoor outdoor entertaining with our lifestyles. And if you're going to put a pool in there, being able to spot that pool from the kitchen's a really powerful, floor plan as well. And like you said, bedrooms can be a more private part of the house as well. So that flow from street through to the backyard, kitchen there to service those areas when needed, outdoor kitchens, and then that backyard that's servicing that space with pools in eye shot. Yep. That's a very strong trend, and I don't think it'll die anytime soon. So, Craig, that's been great today. So thank you for your time. It's been amazing. For more information on what Craig offers, you've got a very detailed website with some step-by-step guides and how-tos, even some cost analysis and little tools that people can tap into. Is that right? Yeah, so we advise how you can make contact, initiate the feasibility estimate, and we can make contact and put that in place and get that ball rolling, and then we can guide you through step-by-step on how to get from concept through to construction, and all the steps in between. Fantastic. So Craig, thanks for your time today. More information on Craig's website. We see your signs everywhere. You're obviously doing a fantastic job, so thank you very much for being on the show. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.